Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we are going to review Rebecca, spy number 135. But before that, we are talking about Fallout that just premiered on Amazon. So, join us!
Welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinks, the show where we talk about the TV and movies we've been watching, as well as do a deep dive review of a current movie or a classic film from the Criterion Collection as voted on by the listener via X. This is one of those Criterion episodes, which we like to call Casually Criterion episodes. The film that won our last listener poll was Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, spy number 135. My name is Justin. With me, as always, is my favorite cousin, Mike. How are you?
Good.
You're also not my cousin, for the record.
What?
You're also not my cousin for the record.
Oh, that's true. But see, the thing is, based on like our agenda, our docket for today, depending on which thing you're talking about, I don't know what you mean by cousin. You know what I mean?
See, it works for both, but I definitely don't mean in the Fallout way.
Oh, okay, good.
But because neither are true in any case. But.
Yeah, but if you were my cousin, you'd be my favorite, probably.
Thanks. Oh, that turned into a sweeter moment than I anticipated. But I am here for it. But I also think maybe even you not being my cousin, once we get into talking about Rebecca, that might still work.
Yeah.
You know? Depending on what you believe.
Yeah. Okay. That's a tease. All right. I like it.
It's such a tease.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, I say we go ahead and just get into it. So, news on the march?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's do it.
News on the march!
All right, Mike, we've got one item and one item only on the agenda for News on the March, so why don't you kick us off?
All right. Yeah, so I haven't been watching a lot. This past week, I was on vacation. I went to Disney World for the first time.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
how was that?
It was good. I got to go to the Galaxy's Edge and do the whole, buy a lightsaber thing. And then afterwards think about how much it cost and then be like, man, why did I do that? But also, it's also worth it, I think. It's fun. It's an experience,
Yeah, it's fun to live like that in the moment sometimes. And, any minor regrets will happen later, but ultimately,
worth it.
Be trumped by the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, so that's why I haven't been watching a whole lot, but I did make time for a couple of episodes of a new show that just premiered last night, and that is Fallout on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is based on the popular video game series of the same name.
As many shows are.
Yeah, it's becoming more popular, and video game adaptations seem to be getting, I don't want to say higher quality, but it feels like that, Yeah,
I think they're getting better, or at least they've been good enough to the point where the expectations and the sort of reputation of them isn't quite as in the tank as they used to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to describe it. Which brings us to this, Fallout, which this is a whole new story. They're not adapting any story element. It's not like an adaptation like Last of Us is an adaptation. You know what I mean?
Good. That was the question I had for you.
Yeah. So the way all the Fallout games work is each game so far has been in a new city. All of them are post-nuclear war wastelands, and they're all very similar, but they're different areas, so you can have stories that are not necessarily connected to one another, except for like loose threads. Mm-hmm. And the show appears to be that same thing so far. I've only seen 2 episodes. They dropped all 8 of them at once, which I am not a fan of, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's well documented throughout our News on the Marches.
Yeah. I like the format that Amazon does for The Boys, where their 8-episode seasons, they drop 3 episodes at once and then 1 episode a week after that. I think that's the best of both worlds. I wish they would have done that, but I don't know. Whatever. But all in all, I will say that this show reminds me a lot of Twisted Metal, the show Twisted Metal.
Yeah.
In
the
a lot
one
of
that
ways.
I think Peacock did.
Yeah, that Peacock did, except in my opinion, higher quality than Twisted Metal in every regard. Like higher quality writing, budget, just everything about it I think is a higher quality. But it's going for that same sort of like irreverent, violent tone, I think.
Yeah.
Which I think works to varying degrees. But I will say that I think Fallout does a much better job at balancing between that kind of humor and character drama and world building in a way that Twisted Metal, I think, is not interested in at all. And I will say that the money looks like it's on the screen in Fallout. It looks like a big production. It looks, expensive. It has kind of a corniness to it that I think is inherent in the Fallout games and in the tone of those games. So I think they've done a good job so far at nailing that. I will say that I'm glad I watched the second episode before talking about it, because the second episode made me like it more than just having watched the first one.
Right.
Which is not to say I didn't like the first one, but the first two I think feel like more like a premiere. If that makes sense.
The first one's like an hour and 15, so it's almost like a short movie.
Yeah, it's a lot like The Last of Us' first episode.
Yeah.
But anyways, mostly I liked it. But I'm interested to see, Justin, you don't play the games at all.
No. My main experience with it is, I think, watching you play Fallout 3 in college.
Yeah.
When we had a lone TV, I think.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
It sounds like I was having a really good time then.
I was too. I like the mechanics of a game like that are something that I struggle to enjoy and get frustrated by. So watching someone play something like a third person or first person shooter is a better experience than me playing them usually.
Sure.
So I was content.
Okay. Well, how content were you watching the first episode of Fallout, the show?
Well, if content is the bar, I would say I was extremely content.
That's
at
good.
a minimum.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I did actually enjoy it. I thought it was really well done. Again, I wasn't sure if we were adapting any specific story. I didn't think so.
No, just themes like there's always a vault. There's always a vault tech.
Someone leaves the vault and goes out into the world.
Yeah, that's the case for most of the games. Not all of them, but most of the time that is accurate.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed. I didn't even watch the trailer for this, so I knew Walton Goggins was going to be in it, and had seen an image.
I like
of him,
that guy.
and I always like him, so that was fine. So I was excited to see the girl from Yellow Jackets as the lead. That was fun.
Yeah.
To see her again because she's good.
She was the best thing about that show.
Yeah, what I watched of it, I didn't finish or watch all of it, but what I watched, I enjoyed her. Kyle MacLachlan showing up was fun.
Yeah, always good to see that guy.
Yeah, but I like the tone. I see what you're saying about Twisted Metal. It does kind of have that, but I mean, to me, it almost felt a little bit closer to The Boys in tone, and the way The Boys handles its mix of violence and darkness and comedy. And just, I wanted to say a zany world, but it's not quite zany. That's not really like the right word.
Sure.
But just kind of wacky in places.
Yeah, it's a weird, wild world in the wasteland of Fallout, you know?
Yeah. I will say that I was enjoying the Vault story a lot more than the other main story we get in that first episode, which I've only seen the first episode, by the way. I have not seen episode 2 yet, but I will watch episode 2 probably tonight after we're done recording and after I eat.
Yeah.
But the second story with the guy that was in the sort of pseudo military, yeah, I enjoyed that less, which is not to say that I didn't enjoy it, but I found myself wanting to be back at the vault mostly.
Sure.
during that, and I enjoyed the bookends. And I don't know if we really want to spoil episode 1.
Yeah, I
it's a
think we
huge
can
deal
talk
if we
about the first episode. They dropped the whole season at once. If you're listening to this, it's all available. So I think cut loose on episode 1. What do you want to say?
Okay, sure. Well, so I enjoyed the bookend. Opening up with Walton Goggins
Yeah,
pre bombs,
yeah,
and then ending up coming back to him, and that was one thing. Like having no knowledge of the game, I don't understand what's going on with him biologically at all.
yeah.
So that was one of the things that hooked me into like I'm definitely going to watch another episode because I was what's going on? How is this? What is this?
Yeah.
How is this working? I don't know if I'm going to get answers or if it matters.
Yeah, I could tell you, but I don't know if they're going to explain it to anyone.
I'll watch more, and
Yeah.
if they don't,
If the questions become too unbearable, I'm here.
yeah, exactly. But it was funny. I thought the opening was really cool. The whole bomb scene and bombs starting to go off was really effective. And,
Yeah, that part where like that it's like that wide shot where he's like on the horse going down the road, and you could just see like the horizon.
Yep, that's literally what I was about to say. It was like that shot to me. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, it's like,
This
oh
is-
man, that would be terrible.
Yeah, and it's working. It looked good. It looked cool. It was a good shot.
Yeah,
So it immediately gave me like a sense of confidence, and I also like that the episode's titled "The End." So the first thing you see beyond like the studio bumpers is a big text that says "The End" on screen.
yep.
I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think they've struck like a fun balance so far based on the first 2 episodes. I think if you liked episode 1, episode 2 is an improvement on that even, I think. Yeah, it remains to be seen where this is going. Here's the thing about Fallout games also is the characters are always like silent kind of people, and you sort of like choose to align yourself with certain sides or others, and then the story kind of plays out around you. You're an active participant, but your character very rarely has like any kind of personality or anything like that. So I always struggle to finish the games because the worlds are always so rich that it's like open world that a lot of times I just get bogged down in like side quests and never finish the main stories of a lot of Fallout games. So one thing that I hope that the show does is I hope that there's a nice build and unveiling of things, because I honestly have no idea where this is going to go. And I'm hoping that they're able to prioritize story in a way that I don't think the video games are so focused on, because they're not really cinematic experiences. They're very much video game experiences, you know? Like, there are certain games that I think have cinematic qualities to them, but Bethesda games are not it.
Yeah. Are there even any sort of like cinematic things where you watch people talk and have actual like scenes, or is it all just done through dialogue through like the main view?
You're always in the first person view, and it's always just kind of like people talking at you, and then like 3 options will pop up and you can select one of them and they'll kind of react to it. Fallout 4 kind of introduced like a character having a voice, but it's not like I don't know. You know, it's not satisfying cinematically. So like I said, it's a totally opposite situation of something like Last of Us. So I'll be interested to see how they can translate that to like dramatic storytelling the whole way through. I think so far they're off to a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was also very effective, the whole scene after the wedding, and they go to like the room to consummate the marriage, and you're following her brother venturing into the other vault.
Yeah.
And realizing what's going on, and then you start to like vaguely hear all the violence that's going on.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell because
room.
like the dude's got scars, and you're like, why would he have scars if he's like a vault dweller?
Yeah.
Right? You're like, why would that? Doesn't make sense, you know?
Yeah, and they you see him get undressed, but I don't think you quite see any scars initially.
Right.
Or if you do, it's in a wider shot, so it's like really you don't notice them, and then I think once you realize something's up with the other vault, it cuts back, and then you can very prominently see a scar. So they do a really cool job of
hiding
of
information,
unveiling, and doling it out in a way that feels really, really, really intense and has a good payoff and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's all I've really got because I can't really talk about too much else. I'm trying to remember what happens in the first episode. Is there anything you want to tackle before we move on?
I don't. I was grossed out by the toilets in the military sort of section.
Oh yeah,
so. There's some gross out stuff in this.
Yeah,
that I'm sure we'll continue.
Yeah. Okay, let me just ask you real quick because I don't think there's ever a definitive answer given. Do you think that, I'm sure it'll be answered throughout the season, and people who have already watched the season listening to this will be frustrated, but do you think he put that razor blade in that boot?
I do not.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't, and primarily it's because one of the other people is like a guy I've seen in movies before as like a Weasley little like a guy or a kid or a teenager or something doing crappy things. So like maybe that's intentional to misdirect me.
Sure.
But I suspect that guy.
Okay.
But we'll see.
Awesome. Okay, that's all I think I had, but I recommend you keep watching because if you liked the first episode, I think you will like the second.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like there's any prerequisite of needing to have played the games.
Yeah, it feels
is another thing I want to say.
Yeah, it feels like it's explaining things and unveiling information in a way to where you understand the world that people are inhabiting, or at the very least are intrigued by things they haven't explained yet. Like wondering what's up with Walton Goggins, you know?
Yeah. Any questions I have feel like the right questions. Not
right.
Not like I'm confused and don't understand.
Yeah. Like they're assuming I know and care about things I do not.
Yeah. None of that so far that I've picked up on anyways. I'm sure there's Easter eggs aplenty for those who have played the games.
The entire soundtrack, I think, so far has been songs that are in the radio station on the little you can listen to on the little computer. You know the computer that she wears on her arm?
Yeah.
Her little Pip-Boy? That is your game interface in the actual Fallout video games as well. So
right.
A lot of the screens and stuff that she's using are things that video game players will know well. But anyway, that has a radio player built into it, and a lot of these songs are just kind of in-game songs.
Very cool. So there's probably some nostalgia.
Yeah.
To
Easter eggs aplenty, if that's your thing.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're done with Fallout.
Yes.
All right. Cool. So moving on to our review of Rebecca, Spine number 135, starting now.
Announcing the return of the most glamorous motion picture ever made, David O. Selznick and Alfred Hitchcock bring you the Grand Slam Prize winner that made motion picture history. Winner of the Academy Award, voted by America's critics as the best picture of the year. And now, as a result of a national poll, winning new honors as audiences throughout the country vote to see it again. The Selznick Studio's successor to Gone with the Wind, Rebecca, brought to the screen with all the warmth and emotion that made millions of readers acclaim Daphne du Maurier's bestseller as the most exciting love story of our time. The fascinating Max de Winter lives on the screen in the person of Laurence Olivier.
Why, it's Max de Winter.
How do you do? The shy, unsophisticated young girl who dared to follow in the footsteps of the beautiful Rebecca is portrayed by lovely Joan Fontaine.
How could I ask you to love me when I knew you loved Rebecca still? Whenever you touched me, I knew you were comparing me with Rebecca.
What is the mystery of Rebecca? What dread secret is hidden within the silent walls of Manderley?
It's not only in this room. It's in all the rooms in the house. I can almost hear it now. Do you think the dead come back and watch the living?
Tell me, Is Mrs. Van Hopper a friend of yours or just a relation?
No, she's my employer. I'm what is known as a paid companion.
I didn't know companionship could be bought.
There's mystery, love, and laughter in Rebecca, the motion picture still unsurpassed for suspenseful romance.
All right, so as always with our Criterion films, we will not be doing our usual spoiler-free section up front like we do for our newer films. These Criterion films have typically been out for years, if not decades and decades. This one's from 1940, if I recall correctly, so it's been out for a while. So consider this your spoiler warning, your spoiler alert. If you have not seen Rebecca, pause the podcast, go watch the movie, come back and finish listening, or keep listening if you just don't care about spoilers.
Yeah, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Go wherever you want in that house. Do whatever you want.
The world is your burrito.
There you go. All right. So Rebecca was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It stars Laurence Olivier, Joan Fontaine, George Sanders, and Judith Anderson. The IMDb synopsis says, a self-conscious young woman juggles adjusting to her new role as an aristocrat's wife and avoid being intimidated by his first wife's spectral presence.
Sure.
Yeah, kind of.
I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I think that's there feels like an air of Hitchcock kind of be associated with horror, trying to be tied into this synopsis that, in my opinion, isn't really there. But what are you gonna do?
I don't know that I associate Hitchcock with horror so much as thriller and suspense. He is the master of suspense. And I do think that there is thrills and suspense to be had of the psychological variety in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I read this, I would get the vibe that his first wife was like ghost was going to be hanging around, or there'd be like supernatural, sort of spooky stuff.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a mislead on whoever wrote that synopsis, but what are you going to do?
Sure. But okay, this was your choice on the Criterion Poll, and I believe because it was nominated for Best Editing, even though it didn't win.
Yes, that is correct.
So, it did win 2 Oscars, though, which are Best Cinematography and something else. Can't remember.
Best Picture?
Yes, Best Picture.
Yeah. I believe, sidebar, Hitchcock's only Best Picture win, right? Am I right about that?
That's a question I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I can Google it while
I give you my
you're giving
thoughts.
us your thoughts, and then I'll follow up.
All right, good deal. So this is my first time seeing this film. I believe this is one of the big Hitchcock movies that I have yet to see, or I had yet to see until now. Believe me, there are still plenty I need to watch. That man made a lot of movies. But of the big ones that I frequently hear about, this was one of the last ones. But I really enjoyed this movie. It's not one of my favorite Hitchcock films. It wouldn't crack my, top 5. But it is very strong. It's this sort of creepy, gothic, psychological thriller. And I really thought it was pretty cool. I wasn't sure where it was going, and I can't say that I was super surprised at anything that unfolded, but that doesn't mean it wasn't solid and strong and it wasn't compelling, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
I think, as always, with Hitchcock films, they're very well shot and crafted. My main complaint about the movie, if I had to lodge one, would be that, in my opinion, the third act feels a bit rushed compared to the pacing that we have had for the rest of the movie up to that point. But other than that, I think this is, a very solid movie, and when it was over, I was happy that I had seen it and understood why it's considered to be a classic, even if it's not one of my personal favorite of Hitchcock's movies. So, that is where I come down on Rebecca. So, Justin, what are your thoughts?
Well, to follow up really quickly, Hitchcock was nominated 5 times for Best Director and never won.
Oh, okay.
And I think he had 3 other films nominated for Best Picture, but the Rebecca is the only one that won, so I guess you would have had 4 in total nominated. Rebecca is the only winner.
Okay.
So you were right
Sweet.
on that front.
I like hearing that.
Yeah. I think some other things might have won other awards, but that's a little too much research that I have time to do on the fly
Yeah.
while
we
recording.
very succinct. I was right.
I
That's the
should
fact.
just left it there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my thoughts on Rebecca, like you, this is my first time seeing it. Didn't know a whole lot about it. Honestly, it didn't even really come with much of a reputation, like other Hitchcock movies do. So I had very little expectation going into it, and I think early on I wasn't sure how much I was going to like the movie, because it starts with what is, in my opinion, an insufferable old woman character that just grinded my gears to a point where, like, I wasn't even sure I was enjoying it. Anytime she showed up, I was like, oh, this is just a terrible person. I don't even like seeing on screen. And once we moved past that section, I started enjoying it a lot more. And I think with Hitchcock being suspenseful, there is always that expectation that, or I had the expectation that, the whole suspicious death of his wife, or the death of his wife, would become more suspicious than it seemed, because everyone seemed pretty settled.
Yeah.
But there's so much bubbling under the surface about it, like with Laurence Olivier's performance and the maid, Judith Anderson.
Yeah.
Her performance.
Miss
Danvers, yes. Like, there's so much going on underneath the surface with them that I think once you really get to Manderley, to the estate, and the movie's going from there, it's just slow boiling in a way that kept me really intrigued of trying to figure out, like, what exactly the situation is.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of aware there's like, okay, her death is going to be more than it seems on the surface.
Yeah, there's going to be another shoe that drops at some point for some reason.
Yeah. But what exactly that is and the circumstances around it, I think didn't really seem that obvious to me, and it seemed like it could be any huge number of things.
No, I wouldn't say they're
reasons.
obvious. I just wasn't surprised when anything unfolded. I think there's a difference. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't trying to predict it. I wasn't trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily me commenting or going back to what you were saying necessarily. That's just kind of how I felt. Was just like, I know in general, like, what, but I don't know. This could be so many things that I think, like, your mind just gets to race and, like, explore all these possibilities while watching the movie.
Sure.
And that kept it really, really interesting to me. And then to your point about, like, the third act, at first it seems a little underwhelming, but I think in the end I kind of enjoyed thinking back on how all the different characters sort of handle this accusation unfolding, and particularly once we get into the scene with the cousin and him and the police kind of going through everything, and then feeling out the doctor, or seeking out the doctor, and finding out that it was cancer. It was a bit of, like, an underwhelming twist. You know what I mean? It's almost like,
but it felt right.
Yeah, because it's like her having cancer it's sort of opposite of the melodrama that preceded it, and it kind of it was really interesting to me the way that it sort of killed the melodrama.
Yes.
And I loved that.
Yeah.
Especially in hindsight of, like, wow, okay, that's that's really not what I expected. And so I was surprised that I was surprised ultimately in the end, and I found it to be an enjoyable ride. There's some like really cool shots in here that I could see why it won cinematography at the time. Some really striking stuff with the maid in the room, and like particularly the end when it's on fire and she's inside of it. It was one of those things where like when you're kind of nervous for the actor,
Right.
Your is shooting that scene near a bunch of fire.
Yeah.
As much as the character, but that's one of those things that makes like practical effects a little more impactful than CG sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was cool. There's a lot of cool miniature work that, despite I think kind of ultimately being able to tell that it was miniature, there were times where I was like, is that a miniature?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. So it's pretty well done in that sense.
Hitchcock is really great at masking miniatures in a way that I think really shines through in this movie, especially in this movie. But I think he also did some miniature work in the 39 Steps.
He did, and that was prior to this movie.
Right.
If I recall
This is his
correctly,
first
and
American movie, Hollywood.
Yeah, his first collaboration with Selznick.
Yeah, and
I read.
apparently they clashed quite a bit.
Yeah, maybe for the better, because this
who-
movie's pretty good. Is ultimately what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
It's again maybe not my favorite Hitchcock, but I think that might be down to other Hitchcock films being a
Awesome.
bit more epic and grand, at least in the way that their endings feel, or awesome, as you said.
Yeah.
This one just feels more subdued, especially with the ending. It's like, oh, okay. I mean, the whole fire burning down the estate thing almost... We hit that point so quickly. I don't know. It almost feels like they were like, well, we need a more exciting ending than what we were getting. And I don't know how the book is, and I don't know if that was tacked on, but it almost feels like it could have been tacked on, or could have been something in the script phase where like, well, we can't end a movie on such a not exciting note.
I think it feels right. I don't know if it's in the novel either. Let's
Yeah.
just assume it is. But
Yeah, probably.
I think it works because of the enigma, the mystery that is Miss Danvers, right?
Yeah.
Who turns out to be the most fascinating character in the movie.
Yeah, I agree.
The dynamic between her and Mrs. De Winter, our protagonist, who never gets a name, by the way, just Mrs. De Winter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Or the
know
second
that.
Mrs. De Winter.
Right.
Which I think is interesting as well. But their dynamic is so interesting and so obviously, in my opinion, the beating heart of this movie that whenever I was doing the opening credits earlier, listing the actors, it is such a shame that Laurence Olivier is first billed on this because, man, is this ever Joan Fontaine and Judith Anderson's movie, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. And that the episode art I'm making for the episode doesn't have Laurence Olivier on it.
Yeah,
You'll
good.
be happy
Get him
to
out of
know
there.
then. Yeah. But yeah, to your point, I totally agree. I do think Laurence Olivier is an interesting character.
Yeah, he's good.
and it's good.
Yeah.
But it's not his movie
Right.
by any means, and he's got a lot going on and things that he does that makes the plot of the movie happen, but he's certainly not the character I'm thinking about
Yeah.
today.
It's interesting. I went through a journey of whenever he starts making his confession and describing everything to her, and she's just like on his side and like believes him. I was getting scared for her because I was like, should we be trusting this guy? Is just because he's telling you that's what happened. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think Laurence Olivier delivers it. Like, I think he's delivering a genuine scene there, because I think he knows where the story's going. But I don't know. I was just worried for our Mrs. De Winter,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you spend the whole movie kind of mistrusting him or knowing that there's something more going on than what he's saying.
Yeah.
So as he's and she's so quick to side with him, and I was like, didn't he just kind of find out he killed his last wife?
Yeah.
And you don't She doesn't necessarily seem to be that worried
Well,
about it.
he didn't. She like fell, right, and hit it like an anchor, or
Well,
hit...
so he says.
right.
but
That's what I'm
he's
saying.
like-
Yeah, I was like, how much of that are we supposed to believe?
but you're finding it by accident, or if he's lying by intent, like you're finding out that he had a hand in killing his wife,
Right.
and like hid her body and put it at the bottom of the ocean or whatever, or sea, and she doesn't seem to have many alarm bells, so she was immediately on his side, at least from what I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me so nervous, where I was like, don't trust him. I thought it was like, she's trusting him way too easily for this not to backfire on her.
Yeah.
But kind of doesn't.
Yeah, it kind of doesn't.
Except she almost gets burned in a house.
That's true.
But she survived that well enough. Her and the dog, thank God. I was worried.
So, I was reading about this movie, and on IMDb trivia, it says that Laurence Olivier and William Powell were both up for this part. But Laurence Olivier supposedly accepted the role for $100,000 less than Powell, so therefore was chosen.
The old practical.
Yep.
The old practical means of why a movie ends up the way that it is.
Yep. Yeah. Well, one thing I think is interesting in this whole thing is because Selznick was a very large personality, and he's coming off of at this point he's editing Gone with the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be his follow up to Gone with the Wind, and I think it's interesting these two working together, these two big personalities, because even though Selznick was a producer, he's one of those producers that was very hands-on, right? And all his movies, had been like big hits. He was like at the top of his career. And so, I don't know. I think it's interesting that he and Hitchcock did not get along. Apparently, Hitchcock was left out of the script writing process for this. And as a result, he did not allow Selznick to come to the set. And apparently, Hitchcock's shooting style kind of did not agree with Selznick, because Selznick was used to seeing dailies where he got to see the whole scene play out in one shot. And Hitchcock liked to cut because he knew how he was going to edit,
Oh, right, yeah.
And so he would look at the dailies or whatever and not like them. And apparently he had to get his wife to come see a cut of the movie and be like, should I replace this guy? What's going on? Did I make a mistake? And she had to assure him that the movie was very good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's one way to control how your movie turns out and not let it just be built in the edit. Which I guess is probably why Hitchcock was Hitchcock.
Yeah. Being
able to do that.
Yeah, Hitchcock was not a great dude by all accounts, but say what you will about the man, he knew how to craft a movie unlike anything that his peers were doing at that time. Even in this movie in 1940, his first American Hollywood movie, I think you can see glimpses of the stuff that he would go on to do later. I think there's a brief first-person shot in this movie going down the stairs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just really inventive, well-crafted scenes, well-blocked, well-paced. Even the dialogue between characters in a Hitchcock movie feels a little slower and more confident than a lot of movies from his peers. And I think you could see that on display in this movie, even at this stage in his career. You could see it in the 39 Steps too, and I'm sure other movies in between that I haven't seen. But even as early as 1940, I think you could see that he had a quality about him that was unique.
Yeah. Do you feel like the pacing issues, later in the movie, do you feel like that's with him being early on and these are things that he overcame, or do you feel like it's a product of the story being what it is and the way that it ends.
I mean, there's no. I mean, it's just my opinion, but
Yeah.
In my opinion, the ending does go a little quickly. I think once we find out about the cancer, like I wanted more time to kind of live and breathe in that for a little bit. Like, what's the favorite cousin? Like, let's see him react to this a little longer. Mrs. Danvers or Miss Danvers. Just I wanted to see a little bit more from things, but at the same time, a lot of movies from this era of Hollywood kind of end like this. I would say to me, it's more of a script issue.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I even hesitate using the word issue. Just like, I don't know, my personal preference, I feel like the ending is a bit rushed compared to the rest of the movie. And I think that is script related, which
Yeah.
I know Hitchcock did not have a hand in.
Right. And does Miss Danvers, does she find out about the cancer ever? Or is it, because the last time we see her, isn't it, she thinks that she was, the original De Winter was pregnant, and then she thinks that Max killed her.
I believe so.
And that's the last time we see her. So like her whole action is based on misinformation.
Yeah.
Like, she's not privy to everything.
Right, but at the same time, I don't know that the truth would have made her feel any better. I mean, maybe, but she struck me as a woman who was always going to miss Rebecca and never was going to get over it and was just going to live in that house no matter what until she died, probably.
Sure. And do you buy Max's story?
I think I do.
That their relationship was terrible, and like they were just kind of faking their marriage, and she was treating him horribly.
I believe so, because his story kind of happens to line up with the information we get later. Because
Right.
the doctor was like, well, she thought she was pregnant, and that kind of lines up with like what she was telling him from his point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was looking for clues. I was like, is he actually a bad dude? Is there any reason we shouldn't believe him? But I think Occam's razor, like I think by the end of the movie we are meant to believe him.
Okay. And
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I believe him, just because I think by his performance when after he's been questioned and whatnot, all seems pretty defeated and more helpless given the situation than cunning or manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me believe him, I think, in the end. And the one thing I was thinking about was Miss Danvers. How much did she know about like their sort of sham for show marriage?
Yeah, and also, what was the full nature of their relationship?
Yeah. Do you have thoughts on that, or is that kind of one of the burning questions the movie leaves you with?
Well, I think it's one of the questions the movie leaves us with. Okay, so let me answer your other question. Do I think Mrs. Danvers or Miss? God, I keep saying that. Miss Danvers knows about like the idea of the sham marriage. I would say probably 1,000%. I think she knew about the secret doctor. She kept that secret, ironclad.
Yeah, they used her name.
Yeah.
Maybe she was aware of that.
Right. And so I think she knew there were extramarital affairs going on. I think she knew the whole itinerary. So yeah, I think there's probably not a whole lot about Rebecca that Miss Danvers didn't know. I don't necessarily know that they had like a consensual romance, but I think Miss Danvers had a above above average affection for Rebecca, right? I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, for whatever reason, if you're taking the story at Max's word that she wasn't a great person, it didn't sound like.
Yeah,
but she still was on her side and still cared for her. I'm not sure what that's about.
I mean,
Or why she
probably probably just loyalty. Maybe Rebecca treated her kindly. That's the thing, is a lot of people seem to really love Rebecca, and except for Max, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I still kind of am suspicious of him by the end. I wonder if the novel dives in any more into this.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there was that other adaptation that was done in like 2022.
Yeah, with Armie Hammer and Lily James.
Yeah, I think it sort of got unceremoniously released and swept under the rug
For some reason.
because of reasons. Yeah. But I found that one of the things that really interesting was just trying to piece together this relationship, and I'm still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the lasting things the movie gives you to think about. And I found the cousin, was it Jack Favel?
Yeah.
The character's name. He was quite charming.
Yeah.
Too. So like I wanted to believe him as well. Like I was when he came with like proof and stuff, I wasn't exactly rooting against him. I was never 100% for Max,
Mm-hmm.
Which was an interesting dynamic. And I thought that guy looked familiar who played him, George Sanders.
Yeah.
Did you look him up?
I did not.
Well, he's in All About Eve, so I've seen him there. But
Okay.
he does the voice of Shere Khan.
I
in
was
the
about
Jungle
to
Book.
say, I was like, he sounded super familiar to me.
Yeah. Yep. So, I guess he played Mr. Freeze in Batman, the Adam West one too,
All right.
which is less cool than Shere
Yeah,
Khan.
which I've also seen, but not recently enough to have recognized George Sanders.
yeah, doesn't really mean anything. I don't know that I have a lot of philosophical things to pull from this movie. I don't know if there's much I can talk about in the way that it affected me or made me feel. I think I was just
I think it gave me a
entertained.
sense of unease. Like when it was over, and today when I think about it, I'm kind of like, man, that was kind of a bummer movie. But like,
Mm-hmm.
in like not even like an overwhelming kind of way. It's not even like depressing. It's sort of just this kind of gothic mood piece. It's just sort of, I mean, I guess if you're you and me, you can get caught up on whether or not it was a happy ending, if you trust Max or not. But
right.
um,
I don't know that it was I don't know if there's a happy ending unless you want to like
yeah,
really
happy seems like a stretch.
if you want to like really
Squint your eyes.
zoom out on the or squint your eyes on the idea that Manderley and Rebecca was clearly like hanging over them and keeping
Yeah.
them from having a successful relationship, and
Right.
he even makes that comment of I've done a horrible thing by marrying you.
Yeah. I
and
wonder if it
bringing you
wasn't
into
very
this world.
selfish of me or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and now that's resolved, and Miss Danvers is gone, and
Yeah, that problem
Manderley
took
is
care of itself.
burned down, so they can. It's maybe soon to be, or soon to have the potential to be happy.
Right.
Is like
Well,
the
it's-
most happy ending I can subscribe to.
Yeah, like because like even though it wasn't a ghost story, the house was very much haunted.
Yes.
It's not a ghost story, but it's very much a ghost story. Rebecca is ever prominent throughout everything. I was reading also on IMDb trivia that there is a predecessor of the synth, like a noise that plays in the score when Rebecca's name is mentioned prominently in a scene multiple times throughout the movie. So like even when they mention the name Rebecca, you're supposed to kind of get like a chill,
Yeah.
So I think it very much works as like they have vanquished the ghosts, and the people that kept the ghosts, stirred up. So in that sense, I guess it's happy, but it's hard to consider anything in this movie particularly like a happy ending. But I think there's one ending that's dramatically worse if you don't trust Max.
Yeah, that's definitely not happy. It did make me laugh, maybe appropriately, maybe not, whenever she insisted on attending the meeting with him, and she kind of had this idea of like, don't lose your temper or whatever.
Yeah.
And she does not hold it together during that interrogation when he's being in the like sort of court.
She doesn't, or he doesn't?
Both, but particularly her. After, I think she kind of talked to him about like how important it was that he keep his cool a bit.
Did she not keep her cool? What are you referring to?
She was like freaking out and starting to cry while he was being questioned. And like,
I thought you meant her fainting
you know what I mean?
thing. I was like, that was very premeditated though. Her fainting.
Was it? Okay.
Because he was losing his temper, and she could tell he was losing his temper, so she fainted so that it would distract everybody and give him a chance to cool off.
Okay. I guess that maybe I didn't quite read the fainting that way, but prior to that.
Yeah, it was very intentional, because like he starts losing his temper, and he's like, I don't want to be questioned like this or whatever, and then she's like, uh-oh, and then she like just sort of passes out on the ground, and everyone's like, what?
Yeah. I guess it just, to me, if I were to see that and see her like crying and getting all teary-eyed and like shaking her head and stuff, it just seemed like it would seem very suspicious.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe I read it
felt
wrong.
to me
Maybe
like
I
she
read
was
the
giving
scene
it
wrong.
away.
But that's how I understood it. Is that she was taking one because she knew he was about to make things worse.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's possible that both things can be true, at least like up to the point where her reaction to him losing her temper and her realizing it just seemed like it was calling a lot of attention.
Sure. I think
maybe
the attention.
That was a purpose.
I don't know. I mean, I think she was trying to get the attention away from him in that moment. I don't know about the crying leading up to that. I will say that while we're on the subject here, it's crazy that we've gone this far into it and haven't mentioned that Joan Fontaine is awesome in this.
Yeah.
She doesn't seem like your average Hitchcock leading lady. I don't know if he'd defined his type yet at this point, but I think she's great. She just sort of has this deer in a headlights look about her the whole movie that made me really worried for her frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a naivety that didn't seem too unlikable.
Right.
Or anything like that, didn't go too far.
Although I think
we
sometimes when
compliment
she's
her.
like, I'm just dumb and I would never have like a good partner. I'm just like this dumb person. I was like, you would do fine. I'm sure you'd be fine in the room if you didn't have Max here.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we compliment her to an extent when we're talking about it's her movie and Judith Anderson's movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think that's true. And I think Olivia is also not quite what I expected or what was typical. I thought his performance or his character was very different than other Hitchcock stuff. I mean, maybe shades of how Jimmy Stewart is in Vertigo and Rear Window, a little vulnerable, a little insecure.
Yeah. I
think
can't
sometimes I think
imagine
of-
William Powell being that vulnerable
No.
had he done it.
Yeah, he's a little too self-assured, and a lot of my memory of other leading Hitchcock men, which maybe I'm focusing a bit too much on the Cary Grant Hitchcock movies, but there's a confidence and a
cocksureness.
Yeah. So I thought that felt very different too. I kind of expected him to be a little bit different, and it almost threw me off for the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Where I was like, what is this performance? I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
But it all makes sense in the end.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I think we did it, right?
I think so. I don't like I said, I don't have much more to say about the movie affecting me in any way other than being quite an entertaining and ultimately a very cool
Here's
cool
a
mystery.
here's a final question to close us out. What are you giving it out of 5 on Letterboxd?
I would probably give it a 4.
Yeah, that's what
That's
I'm.
my
I rated
instinct. Nice.
it a solid
I
4 out of 5.
I haven't done that yet. Sometimes I'm torn on whether I should rate it before we record so that you have no idea how I felt about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. This time
Sometimes I rate too soon, and through the course of the conversation, my opinion goes up or down, and then I go back in and edit my initial rating. So I really should wait and give it like 2 or 3 days, but then I forget, and then I know there's big gaps where I'm like, I know I watched something in there, but whatever, I can't remember.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think I would have given it a 4 last night, and I'm still at a confident 4.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Solid movie.
So,
Hitchcock didn't disappoint. I'm trying to think of like the next like biggest movie that I haven't seen. I guess Torn Curtain.
sure. Yeah. I want to say maybe Rope feels like a big deal, but only
haven't
because
seen
it's
Rope?
talked about. No.
Oh man, you should see Rope. It's good.
So, yeah, it's always talked about whenever a movie like 1917 or Birdman comes out, where they do a lot
Yep.
of,
Long-
where they try to make it seem like one long take or do a lot of long takes. So that feels important, even though
Yeah, I enjoy Rope.
don't
I think
s- yeah.
I think there's a strong but small group of people that really go to bat for Rope as being underrated. And I don't know if that's
Yeah.
true because you just listed it as to him as like one of the ones you hear about the most, but I don't know. I feel like, there's like the Hitchcock movies you always hear about, like Rear Window, Psycho, Vertigo, The Birds. But I feel like this was like the last one of those for me.
Yeah, it might have been the last one of the big ones, I think. I haven't seen Dial M for Murder.
That's
a
a good
pretty
one.
big one.
Yeah.
That might be the biggest, but
Yeah, Rope
he's
and
got
Dial
too
M
many
are
movies to
both solid.
yeah. Well, I don't think that one's on Criterion, so that'll be a one that
Yeah,
we'll
that'll be a
have to watch on our own
recreational
time.
watch.
But okay,
Cool. Time to pick our next Criterion options for people to vote on.
yeah. So, do you want to tell them the theme, or do you want me to tell them? Since it was sort of my idea.
Yeah, you go for it. I think you've earned it. You thought of it. You've earned the right to let people know what it is.
Yeah, good. So, basically, my thought was, with no real motivation. Like sometimes we tie it into the film we just watched, or like the season of or holidays coming up, but no real motivation to this. But I thought it would be fun to just kind of do a continuing series for our next Criterion episodes of basically going a film from each decade, starting with the 2020s and then going back to the 1920s. I'm not certain if there are 1910s movies on Criterion. There probably are, but there's maybe not that many. We'll have to see when we get
Our
there.
options may be very limited.
Yeah. I know when you sort on Criterion and you filter out by decades, 1920s is the earliest decade you can choose.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to filter films from the 1920s.
I can't think of. Phantom Carriage is 20s, right?
I believe so.
Well, we'll see when we get there.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll cross that bridge. But anyway, so a film from each decade, starting with the 2020s. So this one will be 2020s. Next time we'll choose the 2010s, then 2000s, and so on. And we don't do Criterions every week, always, but we have lately. So
Because there's
maybe
nothing
we'll get through
in
it quickly.
theaters worth doing a contemporary movie over a Criterion for, in my opinion.
Yeah.
been a
I
slow-
share that opinion.
Been a slow beginning of the year.
Yeah. So, which is not to knock the movies that are out that are probably good. Like I think I'm interested in like Monkey Man seems interesting.
Yeah, there's stuff I want to see, but
But I'm kind of we talked about this before. That maybe off air, maybe not. I don't remember. But that the Criterion films we've just kind of been in the mood for them.
Yeah.
And they've been more enticing
yeah,
lately.
we did them sparsely over the past couple years, and it feels good to make up for lost time, I think.
Yeah. So we'll see how fast we get through this was my ultimate point. But to go to our choices, Again, a film from each decade. We're starting with the 2020s and working our way backwards in history. So, Mike, what is your choice?
Oh,
for
I get to go
2020
first.
Yeah, I just talked a lot.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I will choose a film that I know very little about other than I remember it coming out in theaters. I never got around to seeing it. And so now I am throwing my hat in the ring with this film to try and get the listeners' votes. And that is Moon Age Daydream.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to see this.
Yeah. It's directed by Brett Morgan and is a documentary about David Bowie, whom I have been a fan of most of my life. Much like everyone else who likes David Bowie, I guess. But not a unique or cool thing, just happens to be true. So I want to watch Moon Age Daydream.
Yeah. I'm very curious about this one, too.
Sweet.
And I haven't seen it either, so that's one that...
All right, so what are you going to choose that will possibly kick Moon Age Daydream out of the poll?
Well, I wanted to pick movies that we've both seen and talked about before, but I feel like because they're so much more relevant than Moon Age Daydream, they might just win, and I kind of want to watch Moon Age Daydream, or at least I wanted to have a chance.
Sure.
So I'm gonna go with a movie that I'm curious about, just because these are 2020s films, and this is a Nigerian film, and I have no clue what's going on in the world of Nigerian film.
Yeah.
But I liked the cover art, and that is my main choice here, our main factor in deciding it. But it's I don't know how to say this, Eyumofe.
Okay.
Parentheses, This Is My Desire, I guess is the English title. Debut feature from co-directors and twin brothers Ari and Chuko Isiri.
Okay.
But it's supposed to be very slice of life, very of Lagos, Nigeria, place I know nothing about. Shot on 16 millimeter. This it just feels very like indie slice of life, and set in a world I know nothing of. So that is very intriguing to me.
Yeah, same.
And I want that excuse to just go check out what Nigerian film is doing in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet.
So,
okay. So
those are my choices.
There we go.
Those are our choices.
Yeah. By the time you're listening to this, you can go on X and vote, and we will do a review over whichever one wins. So.
That's right. And our X handle is @casualcinecast.
Oh, yeah.
Too. And then if we remember, usually we do, sometimes we don't, but we put the link in the show notes to the poll.
Sometimes we don't.
But usually we do. So you can check there as well. But if not, just go to X @casualcinecast.
Yeah.
And with that, Mike, are we done with this episode?
We are.
All right. Well, thank you, listeners, so much for listening. And as always, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, go to soundcloud.com/bobscotch.
Right. Now the shadow of Rebecca has lifted over us, and we can move on with our evening.
Yes, we've burned down this review that was our metaphorical Mandalay.
That's right.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, I will talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.